Hello there, welcome once again to our science lesson. And in our previous lesson, we were looking at immune response. And we said that immune response is where, when an antigen is exposed to the body, it triggers some activities in the body. And some of the cells that will be involved, we have already mentioned, include the T cells, B cells of the lymphocytes, and the macrophages. So we have said immune response is important because it's the one that will now fight the pathogen. Instead of pathogen invading the body, multiplying, and then causing a disease, immune response will come in and then deal with the pathogen. But of importance, we went ahead to find out how the immune response works. We have found out that it works through production of antibodies. So when a pathogen is exposed to the body will produce antibodies which will now react, or which is going to fight the pathogen. We call that fighting as the antibody-antigen reaction. And because of that, we were able to find out the types of antibodies. We came up with 4 examples. We have the lysins, which break the cell wall and cell membrane of the pathogen, the agglutinins, which causes clumping together of pathogens. We have the opsonins, which attaches itself on the surface of the pathogenic cells, and in the process it becomes easy for their destruction by the phagocytes and also antibiotic reaction, and then also antitoxins, which neutralizes the toxins produced by the pathogens. And then we found out that we have 2 major types of immune responses, and in a summary we were able to find out that we have what you call innate immune response, and then we have adaptive immune response. Adaptive immune response. Innate is the one which is passed from the parents to the offsprings. Therefore, the person is born with the same. And then adaptive response or immune response is also called acquired. Why? Because the body acquires it after the body has been exposed to the pathogens, either artificially or naturally. So because of that, we were able again to classify adaptive into 2: naturally acquired, and artificially acquired. Artificially acquired. So for naturally acquired, the body is going to be attacked naturally by a pathogen. It will be invaded naturally by a pathogen. It will react by producing antibodies, and the structure of the pathogen shall be retained in the memory cells, such that subsequent attacks of the same person, the body is now able to produce more or large amount of antibodies. For artificially acquired, we must have deliberate efforts of introducing either the pathogen, which is in a weak form called a vaccine, into a body, or we introduce antibodies from a different source into a body. So for that purpose, artificially acquired can be divided into active immunity, and passive immunity. Passive immunity. So active immunity, a weak form of a pathogen will be introduced into a body, and the body will produce antibodies, its own antibodies against the pathogens. But for passive immunity, the body acquires antibodies from a different source. For example, serum or through serum, breast milk, and then across the placenta to the fetus. Active immunity, we were able to cite an example of vaccination. So this flowchart is a summary of the immune responses that usually occur in our bodies. And if you follow it very carefully, using examples, then you can be able to understand it very well. So now, to gauge our understanding of what you have learned, we look at some few questions. So question number one, we have been talking about this factor here. What is an antigen? What is an antigen? What is an antigen? Now, all the activities of the immune system, what we call the immune response, originates from introduction of an antigen into the body. So when you talk of an antigen, it's that molecule. It could be a large molecule. That's why we can say a macromolecule. A macromolecule. So it's this molecule, macromolecule, that usually triggers the activity of the immune system. Macromolecule that triggers activities of the immune system. Immune system. So it's the one that sets on the activity of the immune system. Without an antigen, actually, the activity of production of antibodies, engulfment, and several others are not going to take place. The second question, what is meant by acquired immunity? What is meant by acquired immunity? What is meant by acquired immunity? So we have classified immunity into two major categories. The one that you are born with, the one that is genetically made for you, or that is transmitted from parents to offspring, is part of the genome. But the other one, we said, is called adaptive immune system or acquired immune system. So for acquired immune system, the body is going to be exposed to a pathogen either naturally through natural environment or artificially, maybe through a vaccine. And then the body will recognize the pathogen, thereafter producing antibodies against that pathogen. But now, the memory of the structure of that antibody or pathogen is going to be retained in the body of the affected person, so that when you have subsequent attacks, the same antibodies will be produced in even much large quantities. So we can say is where a body is exposed to pathogens or one, and produces antibodies against the pathogen, and thereafter retains the structure of the pathogen. In its system, for production of more antibodies. Production of more antibodies. More antibodies in case of subsequent attacks. In case of subsequent attacks. Question number 3. Which cells make antibodies? Which cells make antibodies? We have been very clear on this. We have said lymphocytes, but specifically B lymphocytes. But these ones are found as part of plasma cells. So you can say plasma cells and specifically B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes. And then question number 4, explain why it is important to have memory B cells. Explain why it is important to have memory B cells. So we have said the memory cells are the ones that usually retain the structure of the pathogen, such that if we are going to have a second or subsequent attacks, then the body will be able to recognize the same and produce even more or large quantity of the antibodies against the pathogen. So they retains the structure of the pathogen. Retains the structure of the pathogen in its system. So that for subsequent attacks, by the same pathogen, more antibodies are produced. More antibodies are produced. Then question number 5. When you are vaccinated, you are given a form of pathogen. You are given a form of pathogen. You are given a form of pathogen that will make you that will not make you sick. So the question is this: explain why vaccination will immunize you against the disease. Explain why the vaccine will immunize you against the disease. Explain why. So we have already gone through this several times. We have said when a form of a pathogen that is weak is introduced into the system, and we call this form of a weak form of a pathogen as a vaccine, it is not going to make you develop symptom of the disease because it is weak already. So how will it immunize you against the disease? So because it is weak, since it is weak, the body easily produces antibodies that destroys it, and the memory cells retain the structure of the pathogen, and then for subsequent attacks we are going to have more of the antibodies being produced. So we say since it is weak, the body produces antibodies against the pathogen, and its structure is retained in B memory cells. B memory cells, which produces more antibodies on subsequent attacks. So that question is as simple as that. Then question number 6. So from all those questions, you can realize that the principle of functioning of the immune response is simply antibodies being produced, the structure of the pathogen being retained in the memory cells, and in the process, if we are going to have any other pathogen or any subsequent attack by the same pathogen, the body can now just recognize the pathogen very fast and produce even more antibodies against the pathogen. Question 6. Australian government has recommended immunization program. The Australian government has recommended immunization program. Name some of the diseases you have been vaccinated against. Name some of the diseases you have been vaccinated against. So I think this question is very easy because it's a question of experience, what you have already gone through. Or if you didn't know that you have been immunized, you can check the clinical card of your baby brother or your baby sister. So some of those diseases include, I'm very sure, include hepatitis B. We have TB, diphtheria. We have pertussis. Pertussis. Another name is whooping cough. Commonly vaccinated again, we have measles. We have measles, tetanus. We have rubella. So we came across this disease some time back. We gave it another name. It's also called German measles. German measles. And then, without forgetting others like poliomyelitis. Poliomyelitis. Do we have tetanus here? No. Oh, tetanus is there. So those are the major diseases I'm very sure that you have been vaccinated against. So the other topic that briefly we can look at is non-infectious disease. Non-infectious diseases. Now we realize that what we have been dealing with most of the time, where the immune response, inflammatory responses are involved, are infectious diseases. So one characteristic of infectious disease is that they are caused by pathogens. We have already given a list of pathogens. It could be bacteria, fungi, virus, or protozoans. Those are usually infectious diseases, which means they can be transferred. Those pathogens can be transferred from one person to another, either through direct contact or indirect contact. If it is direct contact, then we said that these diseases are usually called contagious diseases. But sometimes, in fact, some of the most fatal diseases that are giving scientific or research scientists a lot of problem are the non-infectious diseases. A very good example is sickle cell anemia or cancer. Those are non-infectious diseases. They do not, most of them do not involve causal agent. We do not have a pathogen. So examples of these diseases or categories are mainly three. It could be either a genetic disease. They could be genetic diseases. We shall look at some of the examples of genetic diseases. They could be nutritional diseases. Nutritional diseases, which means maybe there is excess or there is a limited supply of some nutrients. There is some deficiency in the diet. It can cause nutritional disease. And then some of them are due to the environment. Environmental diseases. Environmental diseases. Environmental diseases. For instance, alcoholism could be an environmental disease because we know that alcohol has or can have effect on liver, even on the nervous system. It can destroy the brain and the nervous system. So these are the major categories of non-infectious diseases. So we look at each one of them. Genetic diseases. Genetic diseases. So when we talk of genetic diseases, these are diseases that have the capacity to be transmitted from parents to offsprings. parents to offsprings, to their children. So they are innate. They are within the genes or the genome of the human being, so it can be transmitted. So the most important causes of genetic diseases are mainly causes. Some of the causes include abnormalities in one or more genes. So at a higher level, you're going to find out how abnormality at gene level can take place, either through deletion, inversion, some processes, through substitution, and several others. So you can have abnormalities at gene level. That's the lowest level for genetic diseases. But also at chromosomal level, we can have either incorrect number of chromosomes due to incorrect number of chromosomes. Incorrect number of chromosomes, or faulty chromosomes. Now, some of this could be, e.g., an example could be the monosomic, trisomic cases, trisomic conditions. In this case, for instance, leading to diseases like Turner syndrome, we have Down syndrome, and we also have Klinefelter syndrome. So these are the diseases, maybe at a higher level, maybe at level 10, you can be able to look at them in a detailed way. So it could be abnormalities at gene level, either more or many of them incorrect number of chromosomes. Either there are many or fewer. When there are many, it could lead to trisomic cases. When there are fewer, it could lead to monosomic condition. And then also due to mutagens, presence of mutagens. So we can briefly look at mutagens. What is the meaning of that? Mutagens. So when you talk of mutagens, these are chemical or physical agents that cause mutation of DNA. Could be physical. For instance, the high energy radiations, or chemical agents. For instance, we have the mustard gas, colchicine. It's an example of that. Some drugs can also cause that. Even some viruses have been classified to be mutagens, are physical or chemical agents that cause mutations of DNA. Example, you can give examples of mutagens, as I've already said, high energy radiations. Example of high energy radiations, the gamma rays, X-rays. We have some chemicals like mustard gas. We also have colchicine. We also have viruses. under this group. So one very emphatic point about genetic diseases, they have the capacity to be transmitted from parents to offsprings because they are affecting an individual at gene level. So because of that, they can be passed from parents to offsprings. Now, you realize that some of the first two causes, there's nothing you can do about it, although also marriage at counseling at marriage level can reduce some of those instances. We are going to look at one of the disease. And then mutagens, you can avoid high energy radiations in your environment. Sometimes you realize that where we have a nuclear plant, there's always a sign showing that that's a dangerous point, that sign. I'm using black, but it's usually in red, like that. That is red, showing that at that point, we have cases of emission of high energy radiations. So you are supposed to avoid such a like. That's why even from the medical point of view, if you want to take an X-ray, you realize that that room is well structured such that we have very thick walls of concrete around the machines that are used to carry out the X-rays to prevent emission of the same into the environment. So examples of genetic diseases include, examples are these. We have this sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is a genetic disease. It is usually transmitted or caused by a recessive gene. And we know that a recessive gene, to express itself, it must be in homozygous condition. So if we have two couples and they have the gene maybe in a heterozygous condition, they can be advised not to go on to marry each other so that we reduce the chance of some of the babies being born with sickle cell anemia. We have hemophilia. Hemophilia. We know hemophilia where the blood takes abnormally long time to clot. In the process, it leads to excessive bleeding or hemorrhage. We also have cystic fibrosis. Fibrosis. And others like Down syndrome that we have already mentioned. Down syndrome. We have Turner syndrome. And Klinefelter syndrome. The Klinefelter syndrome. So you realize that some of these diseases are fatal, but as I've said, some can be avoided, especially if they are sex-linked, like hemophilia, like sickle cell anemia. The second category of the diseases are nutritional diseases. Nutritional diseases. These are mainly due to either lack of some nutrients in the diet or excess of the nutrients in the diet. If, for example, you go to the developing world, you realize that one of the major challenges of developing countries is putting food on the table. Because of that, most of the children and even adults suffer from malnutrition. And in developed worlds, like United States of America, sometimes the children are consuming a lot of junk food that has a lot of fats. So in the process, it could be either excess of a given component of diet or a limited supply of the component in the diet, leading to a problem. So when we talk of nutritional diseases, what we factor in mostly is the diet. So people are supposed to get balanced diet. And diet consists of both of quality and quantity of variety of foods. So when you talk of quality, it comes to the balanced diet. So diet is supposed to be balanced such that it has all the components, such that it will have carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, water, and fibers. We shall say that that is quality. But at the same time, it's supposed to be just enough, not too little, not too much. Quantity. You cannot take too much or too little. Too little can lead to malnutrition. So here, as we move on, we can just try to look at what a balanced diet is supposed to be composed of. Balanced diet consists of carbohydrates, it should have proteins, should have lipids, should have minerals, should have water, and fibers. I hope you know the role of each of the food in the balanced diet. But sometimes, to lead to nutritional diseases, there is usually some problem in the balanced diet, either excessive of some of the foods or limited supply of some of these foods leads to nutritional diseases. So excessive supply or limited supply, limited or lack, you can talk of deficiency of some of the food in the diet may lead to nutritional diseases. We can use examples. For instance, if you take excessive amount of fats in your diet, you know the problem. It usually leads to accumulation of fats in the blood vessels. The effect is that there will be a problem on the heart, there will be a problem of high blood pressure. It can lead to even some kind of hernia and even some kind of cancer. So, as we have mentioned, excessive supply of fats, for instance, in the diet can lead to overweight. Now, when you are overweight, the problems that come in, it comes with overweight, comes with high blood pressure, also called hypertension. Now, high blood pressure usually overworks the heart. When the heart is overworked, it causes a problem to the heart, causing problems, some kind of hernials, causing hernials, and some very fatal condition called the stroke, where the blood vessels in the brain, due to high blood pressure, they burst, releasing blood into the brain. Brain cells, when they get into contact with blood, they die immediately, which can lead to coma and even death. So this is excessive, for example, fats. And limited supply, limited or deficient supply of some foods can lead to malnutrition. We may realize that malnutrition comes with development of deficient diseases. Some of the deficient diseases include Some of the deficient diseases include scurvy, for instance. Scurvy. When somebody's diet is limited in supply with vitamin C, lack of vitamin C or limited supply of vitamin C. We have others that are common in developing countries, Africa and Asia, like rickets, due to deficient supply of vitamin D, and several others. So at library level, or when you are relaxing at home, you can also Google and look at some of the deficient diseases. You can look at both developed countries and developing countries. The last category is environmental diseases. Environmental diseases are those that actually originates from some factors in the environment. Originates from some factors in the environment. Examples, you can look at some few examples. Like one, if there is heavy metal poisoning, maybe due to presence of lead, if there is an industry or a factory around you or around your home that usually manufactures lead accumulators, some of the raw waste that is released into the sewerage system contains substances like lead, mercury, like thallium. So these are heavy metals, and even bismuth. So what happens if these heavy metals are exposed to the environment for either a longer time, even if they are in small quantities, they usually accumulate along the food chain. We call that process as bioaccumulation. So in small amounts, in small concentration, these metals may accumulate along the food chain. So we call this accumulation along the food chain as bioaccumulation. So as they accumulate along the food chain, you realize that the concentration will be increasing from producers to the final consumers. In other words, if we have green plants at that point, and the lead mercury has been deposited into the river system, green plants are going to absorb mercury, lead, thallium into their system. Green plants will form part, the metals will form part of the green plants. And then when we have fish feeding on them, lead will be passed to fish. And then when we have any other animal feeding on this, let us say man, let us just have a small food chain there, you realize that the effect of lead will not be felt at the green plant level or the producer level, but the concentration will be highest when the food or that metal reaches man. So we call that one as bioaccumulation. But sometimes these lead or heavy metals are usually released into the environment in high concentration. Just in high concentration over a short period of time, again, it can have disastrous effect. We know the effect of lead and the mercury, especially on the nervous system. It damages the nervous system and is also able to cause stillbirth for pregnant women or preterm deliveries. Preterm means before 9 months a child is born, maybe 5 months or 4 months, even before it is mature to get out. Then also another example for environmental diseases is drug-related diseases. Number 2, drug-related diseases. So when you talk of drugs, we have different types of drugs. Some of them are social or medicinal drugs. Medicinal drugs. So sometimes if you take medicinal drugs without the prescription of a doctor, some of the drugs may react with your body. They can damage parts of your organs and in the process cause diseases. So medicinal drugs are able to, if they are going to be taken without prescription, if taken without prescription, they are able to cause diseases. It does not stop there. We also have socially legal drugs. Socially legal drugs, the one that have been licensed to be sold. For example, alcohol. Alcohol is a drug, but if it's not going to be consumed responsibly, it is also going to have some effect. For instance, damage to the liver. And it can also damage the nervous system and even the brain. That's why sometimes when somebody takes alcohol, huge amount of alcohol within a short period of time, we have had cases of somebody going blind. We have had cases of death due to excessive consumption of alcohol. And then sometimes legally available substances that are abused substances. For instance, petrol sniffing. This is very common with street boys. Petrol is a chemical. It can be classified as a drug, but it's a legal substance, legally available substance. Glue is also another example. So for environmental diseases, these are just diseases that result from the management of the environment that we live in. So those are the major categories of non-infectious diseases: genetic, nutritional, and environmental diseases. So we want to wind up. In our next lesson, we are going to look at some few questions just to help us understand more on infectious diseases. Thank you.